Hello again. I've got some science for you today. I thought I'd go for a gait analysis because I've been running for a while now. I know that I overpronate on my right side more than my left, so I wanted to kind of take a look at that and also see if any shoes kind of help me with that or make it worse. Had some interesting results of doing. My shirt today is a throwback for those children of the 80s and 90s who used to watch G.I. Joe. If you remember at the end of those, they'd often have public service announcements for really ridiculous things like don't play with downed electrical wires in the street, don't walk on the ice when it's frozen, you might fall through. And a G.I. Joe would always come and tell them that knowing is half the battle. So we got the battle, knowing, and the rest is red lasers and blue lasers. And something else that was interesting with G.I. Joe, they're the only thing I can think of where the good guys fire the red lasers. You know, usually always Star Wars, the bad guys always got the red lightsaber. But in G.I. Joe, look at it. The good guys fire the red lasers. Also, something I always think is interesting looking back on that, whenever there's a battle, everybody just jumps out of their vehicles and the vehicles explode. Nobody ever gets killed on either side. So they just blow up each other's machinery. That's all that ever happens on G.I. Joe. To get this gait analysis done, I went to a local physical therapy office called Hitting Stride Physical Therapy. And I'll put their website up here so you can take a look at it. And Jordan, the owner there and one of the physical therapists, is the one who did the gait analysis for me. I happen to have a whole bunch of shoes that I'm always comparing, if you haven't noticed. So one thing I thought I'd do as part of that gait analysis is bring a whole bunch of different pairs with me and see if it made any difference running into different shoes, how they would perform, if my gait looked any different, if my overpronation was less or more in one shoe than another. And that was actually probably the most interesting part of that, is it really did make a difference, and the results were surprising to me. Anyone who's been watching my channel knows that the OG Endorphin Speed is one of my favorite shoes of all time, but I'm going to show you some video from the gait analysis that was done, and this actually turned out to be the least stable shoe of the ones behind me here, which is kind of interesting because I brought some of the big wobbly ones because I wanted to see how those would compare. I have the Prime X Strung, the Alphafly, the Vaporfly, the Adios Pro 3, and Deviate Nitro 2 over there. So I'll kind of compare, the angles of my foot, my overpronation, but I want to show you the video first of the Saucony Endorphin Speed because that was the one where I actually had the most overpronation.
This image is showing our initial contact where our foot first makes contact with the floor or treadmill. The red line is the degree of which our foot is striking the ground. So it's the foot inclination angle. One of the lines is through the foot and the other one is to the horizontal or in line with the treadmill, and it's showing us that we have about a 21 degree heel strike. And the green line is the tibial inclination angle. The line is bisecting the tibia or the shin bone, and the other portion of the line is in the vertical. This is showing us that we are landing 15 degrees out in front of us or in front of our body. With both of these angles, we want the degree to be as close to zero as possible. With the tibial inclination angle, the green angle, we want that to be as close or less than 10 degrees would be most optimal to land underneath our body. Here we're measuring the degree of which our knee is bending once we hit the ground. 170 degrees is a little bit on the high side. We want that number to be a little bit lower, which means we're going to land underneath us a little bit more. But once this goes more towards mid-stance here, we're at 140 degrees, and that change is totally fine. But the degree of which our knee is bending at mid-stance is about 40 degrees, which is really good. That's where we want it to be. Here we're looking at how much we're pronating. We're starting with the left foot. So at initial contact, we have 13 degrees. And then once we go into mid-stance, it goes to 8 degrees in the opposite direction. So that's a large amount of pronation starting from a supinated position now. And once we land, going to a very overpronated position. Even on your good leg, on the left foot, this is still a lot of pronation. Now the right foot here, again landing in a supinated position, 9 degrees. We're going into mid-stance. So you can see that significant pronation, especially as we get all the way into mid-stance here. So it goes from a supinated position all the way to an excessive pronation. Now 13 degrees in the opposite direction. Obviously, as we talked about this is way too significant.
One thing I tend to do when I turn up the pace is overstride a little bit. So I was reaching out a little bit too far, and that making the heel strike a little bit more. If I'm going slower paces, I land a little bit closer to the midfoot there, more under my body. But since I was running 10 miles an hour, I was kind of reaching out a little bit further, which was giving me a little bit more of a heel strike. But also what was surprising to me was how much I was overpronating in the shoe, because I've had really great success with this shoe. I really like this shoe a lot. I think it does a good job of giving me efficiency, but also it could be working against me somewhat with that amount of overpronation. So I've run a sub 130 half marathon in this shoe, but from that data, it's also clear that this is not the best shoe for me as far as optimizing my gait and my form goes.
Okay, so here we're taking a look at, on the left, the Saucony Endorphin Speed, and on the right, Adidas Adios Pro 3. The left we have the least stable shoe, and on the right we have the most stable shoe that we went over. As you can see, you land on the left shoe, the Saucony Endorphin Speed. There's a lot more pronation, less stability once we land, especially on the right foot. And then when we move over and look at the Adidas Adios Pro 3, there's a lot less pronation compared to the shoe on the left. So we can see, although we are having a lot of pronation on our right foot still, the shoe makes a huge difference in how much we're pronating depending on the stability of the shoe. I stopped both clips here at mid-stance just to see how much we're pronating. On the left, the Saucony, you can see at its peak pronation, we're at 12.6 degrees. And on the right, the Adidas, about 6.9 degrees. So big difference when we're considering the exact same phase of gait here. Big difference in how much we're pronating, or how lack of the lack of stability the Saucony has compared to the Adidas. This can make a huge difference long term when we're considering a marathon. Even these few degrees can make a big difference in the running economy or how efficient our running gait is. Now from a side angle here, again the side-by-side comparison. I'm not noticing too much of a difference here. We're still landing at it as a heel strike. The foot inclination angle and the tibial inclination angle are fairly the same here. We notice the bigger difference when we start to look at from the back view in terms of how stable the shoe is, and you'll notice a little bit more of the detail as I stop it for a still frame here. Stopping both of these frames at the initial contact, you can see they're fairly consistent with what I was explaining before. Tibial and foot inclination angles are fairly the same. So just to recap, with the Saucony in the back view, we can see that it's very exposed in terms of how much it's pronating compared to the Adidas. This can be a major issue long term with many steps like a marathon. It could be lack of efficiency over a long period of time just based off of a shoe. We know we have excessive pronation on the right foot, and if this Saucony is exposing that, then that can be detrimental to a long-term race. I'm okay with pronation, but when it's too excessive like that and not followed by a good amount of supination, then it's not efficient, and it could impact your running form. So overall, the Adidas in this situation is much more efficient and much more of a stable shoe compared to the Saucony.
I was not surprised that the Adios Pro 3 performed really well in that test, and it was much more stable, but I really didn't realize the degree to which this was helping me to remain stable over those longer miles like a marathon. I wore this shoe for the New York City Marathon, and that definitely makes me think I wouldn't want to take the speed for a race of that distance. That could cause some issues over the course of a longer race. So this one I'm very impressed with how well this did at preventing that overpronation. Now I'll just show some screenshots of how the other shoes did as far as the angle of the landing angle and then the pronation on the right and the left side to see how they compared. With the Vaporfly, I was also not surprised to see that I had a lot of pronation in this shoe on the right side. I've actually felt that in races. When I go longer than a 5K in this shoe, I can really feel that ankle kind of wanting to collapse. Again, this shoe is very, very narrow in the midfoot and heel, so if you are an overpronator, that's something that you could struggle with the Vaporfly. So I'm able to get this shoe up to really fast paces, and if I'm getting my feet kind of underneath me more and landing more of a midfoot to forefoot strike, this is much more efficient. But if I'm overstriding and heel striking, I'm going to have a lot of instability with this shoe. With the Alphafly, probably because of this very big heel, it kind of encourages that heel strike a little bit more. So I had a little bit more angle on the actual landing for the heel strike. But then something that was surprising to me, I actually overpronated less in this shoe than I did in the Vaporfly. It does have a wider heel area than the Vaporfly does. You can see this gets very, very narrow at the midfoot. The Vaporfly is even narrower, but it's a little bit further back. But the Alphafly is actually much wider at the heel. So I think this being a little bit more stable in the heel helped to prevent that overpronation, even though this is a higher stack than the Vaporfly. With the Prime X Strung, I had a little bit less of a landing angle than I did in the Alphafly, but and on the left foot was about the same with the pronation, pretty well controlled, but also not surprising to me. On the right foot, this one really overpronated a lot. This is another shoe that's very narrow in the heel. It gets narrow in the midfoot and very narrow in the heel, a lot narrower than the Alphafly is in that heel area. You can see how much wider that is. So this was helping to resist that pronation on the right side. Also with this shoe, your foot really sits on top of this entire massive stack. This is the highest stack shoe that I have. It's about 10 millimeters higher than the Alphafly is. So it's really not surprising to me standing on top of this giant platform with that narrow heel that this one also suffered from that overpronation on the right side. So we'll close this out with the Deviate Nitro 2, which was the runner-up in this comparison. This one I actually landed the closest to underneath my body, so I had a very good angle when I was landing in this shoe. I wasn't overstriding as much in this one. It was also very stable on the left side and came in second place to the Adios Pro 3 on the right side. So I wasn't overpronating as much in this shoe as I was in all the other ones. This one also has a nice sturdy wide heel. Puma in this shoe also, it's a dual density midsole. There's a firmer foam in the heel. The regular Nitro foam, and then Nitro Elite is in the front, which is the softer foam. So this part squishes in, this part's a little bit more firm. So it being a little bit wider and a little bit more firm, I think that's helping to keep that more stable when going through the gait cycle. This shoe also has a carbon composite plate in there, so the plate is a little bit stiffer than the plate that's in the Saucony. The stiffer plate in this shoe also helps to make it a little bit more stable. So what did I learn from this? Quite a lot, actually. I learned that when I turn up the pace, I tend to overstride a little bit, reach out too far, and that's resulting in me doing more of a heel strike than being more efficient and landing underneath my body. So if I can work on pulling that back, not overstriding, landing a little bit more directly under a bent knee, that's going to help improve my efficiency. And I also learned that I do overpronate with my right foot a little bit more than I expected, and that certain shoes really can help with that, and other ones make it a whole lot worse. So also good instinct for me picking the Adios Pro 3. That was the one of all the carbon shoes that I had that I liked the best and I chose to wear for the New York City Marathon. So I'm definitely going to use that shoe again when I run my marathon in October. Again, I'd recommend, if anybody hasn't done it, to go and get a gait analysis. I'm also going to work on some exercises that I can improve the strength of my right ankle and my right side, some like one leg exercises to try and improve that so that I can kind of limit that overpronation. I've been able to avoid injury for the most part so far, but I kind of want to keep it that way. So I want to make sure I'm strengthening my weaknesses and improving my efficiency as a runner. I would definitely recommend going to see Jordan at Hitting Stride Physical Therapy if you're on the Long Island, New York side of things, or find a physical therapist or a location near you where they perform a similar type of gait analysis. So now I know, and knowing is half the battle. See you next time.